I adore found footage movies, and if you clicked on this video, I'm sure you do too. I'll never forget watching my first one on a whim and finding out that wow, this is scary as hell. Seeing a horror movie played out from a cameraman's perspective is terrifying, especially if it's done very well. It became addictive, searching for the next big thrill, and I started sorting out the best from the countless that exist. Amongst all of them, one really stuck out to me due to its premise and the feeling of nostalgia I got from it. Crave Encounters. If you have no idea what the movie is about, I'll briefly summarize it for you, though I still hope you'll watch it on your own. Anyways, a host named Lance Preston, who is obviously a caricature of Zach Bagans, leads a small TV crew as they investigate paranormal hotspots. They exaggerate their reactions and hype up the history and locations, much like their real-life counterparts, Ghost Adventures. They fake evidence, interviews, and even have a fake, and frankly stereotypical, medium. It's all fake, until they lock themselves in for the night and investigate. Heavy doors start to slam, they hear unexplainable noises, and one of the members' hair starts floating. They try to leave quickly until they realize that they can't. The time has stopped for them, and the night is eternal. The asylum that they're in becomes a never-ending maze of horror. They get separated from one another and get picked off by the ghastly inhabitants that trapped them there. There are some genuinely terrifying and well-done sequences for a low-budget movie like this. Finally, Lance ends up being saved for last and presumably meets his end just like the rest. Now, that was a very quick and crude synopsis, but this isn't the movie I'm going to be talking about. What I'm here to express my overwhelming disappointment in is the sequel. Take a beloved cult classic that ended perfectly and mix it with an uninspired plot and a miserable quality drop, and you get, well, Grave Encounters 2. Did I forget to mention that the budget was way higher as well? The movie is about a film student named Alex who truly believes that the original Grave Encounters movie was genuine. He decides to produce a documentary to prove his belief alongside his friends. I think you can already see where this is going and the dumpster fire that awaits. He receives some information from an internet user named Death Awaits 6. Yeah, wow, really subtle. If that were me, I'd either assume it was someone trolling me or an ominous omen that would alert me to immediately change the subject of my project. However, the info leads him to the mother of Lance Preston, or the actor of said character. They attempt to interview her, but she believes that her son is still alive. Why? Because she has dementia. Oh. Yikes. So not only did they track down a random stranger over a ridiculous hunch, but she also has no idea that her son is missing. Yeah, great job guys, give yourselves a pat on the back. Alex soon discovers that nearly all the people who have worked on the movie were either missing or had passed away, excluding the directors, producers, and interns, who, funnily enough, are the actual writers for the film. Alex also discovers that the film was indeed found footage and that the abandoned asylum is an actual location in Canada. Want to hear something really funny and not at all ironic? The group travels to the location to meet their informant. What they find instead is a carved out Ouija board. And against the survival instincts of normal people, they use it to communicate with the spirits. The plank takes control and announces itself as none other than Death Awaits. It also commands them to film everything before violently flinging the furniture across the room. So, let me get this straight. They suspect that the place is haunted by very aggressive paranormal entities which were responsible for the lives of another group, and their first thought is to contact them with a Ouija board. But, to give them credit, they do try to get the hell out of there like any sane person would. They get stopped by a security guard, almost getting shot, and get into a heated confrontation. They hear a sudden noise and get freaked out because of their previous encounter. The security guard interprets this as a potential straggler and proceeds towards the source, against the multiple warnings and pleas of the group. I swear to God, no one in this movie wants to live. The group argues amongst themselves on whether they should leave or stay, and obviously Alex wants to stay. They hear abrupt gunshots and find shells on the ground, but no guard. Finally, in a comical sequence, one of the members gets flung out of a window. The group panics and tries to flee after reviewing the footage. However, they seemingly forgot what happened in the original and end up in the same infinite labyrinth. They encounter a freaky little girl who ends up chasing them, and I have to admit that this scene was kinda cool, but it looks a little janky. A member named Tessa gets crushed by an invisible force and dragged away after she is separated from the rest of her friends. Side tangent, is it just me, or are the entities in the sequel a lot more aggressive and frequent? I think that's why the first one worked so well. There was a built-up tension to scary encounters sprinkled throughout the film, but this movie just kind of makes them a common occurrence. We're shown the entities multiple times, but the effects ruin these moments because they're so-so at best. And I think that's why the first one works so well for me, despite having a lower budget. I believe this may have been a benefit. They had to work around that issue and find creative ways to amp up the fear factor while keeping the audience engaged. There was an atmosphere where this film lacks. Also, the acting is noticeably worse and the characters we follow are just bland and awful. I cannot stand Alex as a protagonist as he's genuinely not believable and lacks everything that made Lance Preston a fun persona to watch. I'm not saying they have to be the same, but when you're sort of filling that same role, I expect at least a similar level of quality in the writing, not a downgrade. And this is really all this is, an issue with quality. But enough of that, back to the film. The remainder of the group do manage to escape the asylum, and this results in the best moment of the entire movie. They return to their hotel and get into an elevator, but when the doors open, it is revealed that it leads right back into the tunnels of the abandoned hell. After traversing a little more, they meet a very special someone. If this film wasn't already unbelievable at times, this is where it really starts to fall apart. They meet Lance, who has admittedly seen better days. He had survived only on rat meat and toilet water ever since his assumed demise. He had been driven to madness and lived in this darkness for nearly a decade. He also dumped some lore on us explaining that the asylum is that way because of satanic rituals and experiments by a certain doctor. This caused the physical world and spiritual ones to collide, which explains the constant changes to the environment. Lance tells them that a red door is the only way out, but it's locked by chains. Much to their dismay, the asylum's actual dimensions is that of a city. But luckily for them, Lance has a map that he has made during his stay there. Coincidentally, they also retrieve a chain cutter. The group heads to sleep, but the doctor's spirit has other plans. He instructs Lance to strangle one of the members and steal their equipment. He cuts the chains on the door only to discover that it's not an exit. The last remaining two stumble across a scene of the doctor performing a lobotomy and seemingly sacrificing a newborn. This was alright, but sort of mimicked a similar scene from the first film without really adding anything fresh. Lance says that the place wants all of the tapes for a finished product, as that was the only real way to escape the nightmare. And to be fair, I think he really should be the one to leave. He was the one stuck there for a decade originally, and the random people he just met came there because of a stupid student film. Sure, they were slightly manipulated by the entity, but let's face it, they were complete morons and ignored every warning sign imaginable. But of course, that's not how this ends. During an altercation between the students and Lance, he just gets sucked into a gnarly portal. I'm just going to assume he's alive and this is a setup for another movie, cause him dying would just be unfair and unfortunate. Alex, being Alex, decides that Lance was right and selfishly takes on the task of uniting the tapes together. He takes his camera and bashes his girlfriend's face in and completes what the entity wanted. He exits through the door and ends up in an even worse hell, Los Angeles. He is then arrested while roaming the streets. The end. Except that's not quite the end, sadly. The producer and Alex are seen admitting that the whole slogfest of a movie I sat through was just a well-crafted hoax and it's just a movie. But then they double back on their statement by warning the viewer to not approach the asylum as there's no worth to it. Wow, woo, get it? Cause it's being meta and yeah. Listen, in theory this could have been explored in an interesting way, but in practice what we got was a waste of time. The first half of the film could have been way shorter and still have more impact on the latter half of the film. They spend all this time setting up plot points only for it to not make any sense or seem like an afterthought of the events from the first one. The dialogue is laughably cringe, more so than the original. What was a campy satire that was genuinely entertaining to watch turned into a film that took its concept way too seriously. The intense atmosphere was lost as the timing of jump scares and reveals were abysmal in comparison. A lot of the shots felt more like a normal film than a found footage one. Certain angles and shots should be impossible even if there were cameras that the crew set up beforehand. It feels less cohesive and really takes you out of the experience. You don't feel as if you're following the crew through a dark endless nightmare. And don't even get me started started on the ending. It sets up another sequel while also attempting to spin a narrative that says otherwise. With better execution, it could have been, dare I say, brilliant, but it falls way too short and leaves a sour taste in the viewer's mouth with ultimately no payoff. It really does feel like a cringy parody of a film that's already supposed to be a satire. But hey, at least it's self-aware, unlike a lot of horrible horror movies and sequels. Look, there's a lot wrong with this movie. Was I disappointed? Thoroughly. But that isn't to say it's not worth watching, or that it can't be fun at times. It's just that when following the footsteps of such a successful prequel, it missed the mark entirely. But I have seen a lot worse. If you follow me on TikTok, then you'll know exactly what I mean. And don't worry, there will be many videos on that shortly. But until then, stay safe, and until next time, peace.